It's not super exciting video, is it? It's not super exciting video, not super stimulating. No, I mean, what I need to get, and I guess they exist, don't they, are the cameras like that you can put on a tripod and it'll follow you, right? It'll zoom and follow. But then the problem would be making it focus on a board when I just wanted to focus on a board. But I do know this exists. But for the moment, this is not too shabby. I mean, camera quality is not too bad. But hello, America. Welcome to Western Kentucky University. Accounting 110. We're going to learn a little bit more how to learn today. I think a bit more practical than some of the other ones. So I hope you appreciate being here. Here's the story of 3 students. You can kind of see a difference, can't you? At one point in the semester, something clicked. It was after 2 or 3 exams, right? Or 2 or 3 quizzes. And that's right about where we sit in the semester, isn't it? 2 exams in, 2 to go. This could be some of you. This can be some of you. Man, welcome. Ceiling's up, floor's down.
You're right.
I mean, just in case you were a little Maxton, how are you, man?
I'm great.
Awesome. It's good to have you with us. So they became expert learners by using metacognition, the study to learn, not just to make a grade. And there's clearly a difference. And unfortunately, I think your high school, basically your K through 12 experience hasn't done this work, has it? For the most part, I would wager, most students K through, and we'll talk about this in a bit. You were studying to make a grade and answer a question right, not necessarily to learn anything. There's a difference. What is the difference, if any, between studying and learning? For which, and let's just do a raise of hands. For which task would you work harder to make an A on a test or teach the material to the class? So for those of you who would work harder to make an A on a test, please raise your hand. For those of you who'd work harder if you had to teach instead of me, raise your hand. And there were a lot of abstentions, so we're going to try this again. So how many of you would work harder to make an A on a test? How many to teach the class? You think which do you think is harder to do? Teach a class or get an A? Huh?
Definitely to teach a class.
And so why would you work harder to make an A if the actual harder thing to do is to teach a class? You know, you feel me?
Yeah.
Feel me? How many people will know if you got a B on the class? Or how many people will know if you got a B on a test? 2, right? You and your professor. How many people will know if you suck teaching? Every person in the room. Every person in the room that you didn't know what you were talking about. And so, this is the ability to know it so well that not only can you get an A on the test, like if you can teach it, you can get an A on the test. Probably. I mean, my wife, who's an accounting professor here, teaches more things than I do that are on the CPA exam, particularly one section of the CPA exam. And as somebody who's been teaching financial accounting for several years now, she's in year 7, 6 or 7. She looks at CPA exam questions and says, these are pretty easy. Because she's been teaching this stuff. But our students don't think they're easy. And the difference is someone who can teach and someone who's just been trying to get an A on a test. And so I appreciate you all's candor and answers, but I would hope you think, maybe even as soon as now, that teaching is harder than just guessing right on a multiple choice question, right? And this is inadvertently how, one of the ways I did so good in school, I think, as a college student, was because I wound up doing a lot of tutoring of my peers, quite a bit actually. And so I could teach it because I was doing it. So super important. So you want to stay in learn mode, not study mode. What is the difference? How would you articulate this difference, August, between learning and studying?
If you're studying, you're just kind of memorizing.
Study, you're kind of memorizing, and learning, you're what?
Just like understanding the concept.
Really understanding, right? That's really good. I appreciate that. I think that's just spot on. And if you learn, will you do good on a test? Probably better. That's what these people did. They stopped studying and started trying to learn. Study is if you have to teach the material, not just make an A on the test, and then you're going to make an A on the test. And then you're more likely to make an A. So you all might have heard this before, right? And you all might be able to guess what the next quiz will ask you to say. Might be able to. Because this is, I mean, if there's nothing else you remember from these sessions this semester, this should be it. If you really want to get a good grade in a class, what should you do? Learn it. Really learn it. And this is a good book. It's got more in it than what I am teaching, actually. But I'm getting you started. So what is metacognition? Thinking about your own thinking. Kind of really understanding how well am I learning something. And I think this might be a review slide. Think about, metacognition is the ability to think about your own thinking, be consciously aware of yourself as a problem solver. Monitor, plan, and control your mental processing. And this is really, really important. Accurately judge your level of learning. If you think, oh, I got this memorized, I don't need to know anything. And then you walk into the test and it's very different. Then you've misdiagnosed how much you know. Right? Misdiagnosed how much you know. So very important. So here we go. So now this is becoming very practical. We've talked a bit theoretically up to this point as I've done these presentations, but this is a little more practical. What can you do to study better? What can you do to study better? We can do think aloud exercises. Talk to yourself aloud. Anybody know what hacky sack is? Yeah. Little leather wrapped bunch of stuff. When you keep it up with your feet, you kind of like a soccer ball when it doesn't bounce near it so well. And when I was your age, I used to do that a fair bit actually, even in my dorm room. And I remember studying out loud, kicking a hacky sack off the wall in my dorm room. Probably in one of my neighbors on that side. But I did that for hours. I remember remembering stuff for my business law test. Constantly ask yourself why and what if questions. Don't just memorize, right? This is different than memorizing. Always test your understanding by verbalizing or writing about concepts. Practice retrieving information. Practice retrieving information. Make flashcards, for example. Move your activities higher on the Bloom's taxonomy scale by contrasting thinking of the knowledge of thinking of new pathways, etc. Let's see, I think Bloom's taxonomy will hopefully be next. It is. This looks very complicated, doesn't it? What's on the phone that's more exciting than what I got on the board? The picture of the dog is more exciting than Bloom's taxonomy. I mean, look at this. You got it right here. It's bigger than the dog, at least. You know what I mean? And so, start at the bottom. This is a bit of, it's presented as a pyramid because it's considered a bit of a hierarchy. Basically, as you go higher up, your mastery of the material is stronger, right? Remembering just involves being able to remember, right? Understanding is a step beyond that, where you can actually understand, construct meaning, and help being able to classify, summarize, infer, compare, explain. Applying means you can do something with that knowledge. Analyze is more sophisticated work with your knowledge. Evaluating means I can now start to know, like I can judge whether or not somebody actually does know this stuff that I really, really know. And creating is kind of the top, where maybe you're doing something new, kind of expanding knowledge in that particular area. And so the question I want to ask then is, and I'm going to ask each and every one of you. So, at what level of Bloom's taxonomy did you have to operate to make A's reviews in high school? How would you answer that? Remembering and somewhat applying. Okay. Mostly remembering. Remembering. A little bit of understanding. Remembering. It depends on which class. Think about your heart. Which class caused you to get the highest? Math class, and where'd that make you go? Apply. Remembering and understanding. And how about you? Remembering and understanding. Remembering.
I would say also, well, remembering, understanding, and sometimes analyzing.
Did you go to high school in the United States?
No.
Where'd you go?
Venezuela.
Venezuela. So, might be different there. Maybe better. You don't know? Maybe. Understanding. Remembering. Say? Understanding? Where'd you go to high school, if you don't mind? Huh? Greenwood. Oh, just right here. Just right here. And you've answered. Remembering? Remembering and understanding? Both. Remembering? Understanding? Remembering? Where did you do this? Class? Is that a repeat? But most of you, did you really have to learn much? I mean, is remembering really learning? Maybe not. See, so that's the thing, right? I said that at the beginning of the class period today, is I think most of your education up to this point was spent down here, right? Wasn't it? You weren't even asked. This wasn't even a thing. I mean, how many of you have been asked to write something creative, like a poem or a story or something like that? You have? Anybody else? A little bit. So you have done, so that's way at the top. What's that mean? That means you know English well enough to write, and you're trying to create something new. But for the most part, I think you all are taught to take those tests. And that's where you're at. And so this is, and my point is that you, a little more than me, unfortunately, have this background you have to overcome. It's shared by all of you. Shared by all of you. That if you really want to learn something, you're going to have to think about learning differently. It's not just about answering a multiple choice question correctly, or even a fill-in-the-blank question correctly. It is about being able to see an entirely new question and being able to answer it and think your way through it. Maybe I've told the story. my sophomore year of college I spent in Salzburg, Austria, being taught by European professors. And in Europe, oral exams are a thing. Oral exams are a thing, meaning for my final exam for my philosophy class, was me and another student who both signed up for the same 15-minute slot, just the two of us and our professor. And our professor alternated asking us verbal questions. And that was my final exam. In some of my classes, that was almost 50% of my grade. It was that 15 minutes. And so, and I really remember my philosophy professor, because I remember during the semester, we were bebopping along, right? He shows us his handout and he says, we've been going a little slow, so I was gonna go over this material, and we don't have time to do it, so we're just gonna move on. Cool. Except, when I got in with my professor for my final exam that semester, he handed me that sheet of paper and said, here, do the first three. Right? And what would you feel? Probably the same thing I felt at the time, which was like, huh? How can you do this to me? Like, I was a bit grumpy. But for him, A students don't do this. You don't get an A doing this. You get an A doing these things. That's what differentiates an A student from a not A student. And I can't tell you what the questions were. I can tell you I got all three right. Don't know how I did that, don't know why I could do that, but I did. I got all three right. I got an A in the class. But it was because I could do this. I could do that. Okay. Okay. So, you all might not know the answer to this question. I would guess you're still here for most of your classes. As second semester freshman year, this should be, in principle, this year should be your easiest year academically. Freshmen, we as a university are evaluated, we evaluate ourselves on our ability to keep students coming to college. We want your money. We want your money. And so we don't want you scared away or overwhelmed your first year of college. And so, has anybody found it particularly hard? Maybe? A little bit the sciences, did you start in business or?
No, I was a dental hygiene major my freshman year.
Yes. Sciences, they don't beat around the bush. Like the hard sciences, they don't beat around the bush. Is that what were you majoring in? Somebody else raised their hand, I thought.
Oh, yeah.
What was your major?
Maybe finance, marketing.
Finance? So you had some classes that you thought were a bit hard? But for the most part, they aren't intended to be super hard. They're intended, like even this, you know, I've started doing this, teaching this material second semester I taught this class. Because after teaching it for one semester, I really realized that something wasn't quite working right. And so that's when I started taking the time to teach this sort of stuff in class and thinking it was important enough to teach it because, again, really, this is where real learning is occurring, not down at the bottom. And so one benefit of these presentations is that hopefully they help you for the rest of your academic career here, right? I want you to be successful in college. I want you to be successful in college, and so I think this is a way that I can help a little bit. So how do you move yourself higher up Bloom's taxonomy? Use the study cycle and study sessions. And so here, again, very practical, very practical. And I'm thirsty because I'm sweating like a pig because it is so hot. It is a little bit too warm. You're comfortable? Wow, I'm sweating. First, I'm going to exercise. Hopefully, you all are rested. You got a lot of walking and running to do this afternoon. So what can you do to get better grades in class? Do you think about a class at all before the class happened. Ever. Can you do that? In here, you can't, unfortunately. But next semester, students in my class will have at least the ability to watch these videos before they come to class. And have the notes. So when they come to class, they're prepared. You all do have a handy handbook. You can at least look at the topics, right? And see what's coming at you in the next few pages. In a book where you've got chapters or note slides or something like that, you can look at those before class. So that way you have an idea what's coming up. And then go to class. To some extent, preaching to the choir, because you're here Thursday before spring break, when I'm not teaching correspondence. So this is the choir. Appreciate you being here. This is how you learn. But the review after the class, maybe I've also told you this. When I was a college student, I rewrote every word of every page of notes I took during college. I rewrote it usually the same day. Like I'd be done with classes, I'd go back to my dorm room, and I'd spend the next 2 to 3 hours of that day just rewriting notes. And only then would I begin studying, doing homework, and all that kind of stuff. And what that means is that, effectively for me, what that meant was that I lived through the class twice, right? I was there, took notes, and then as I was rewriting my notes, I could fix things. I could think through what the professor said. I could do that. Now, admittedly, I didn't find this as helpful in accounting classes as I found it in other classes. Like I took a political science class that same year in Europe, where I was, in an hour and 15 minutes, I was taking 4 sheets of paper, front and back, in an hour and 15 minutes, full of stuff. History.
Where in Europe did you go?
This was Salzburg, Austria.
Do you speak German?
I can speak a little bit of German, although our education was in English. We were being taught in English. But I kann, ich kann ein bisschen Deutsch sprechen. Okay. Again, this is kind of a European style, I guess, but this political science professor would come up there with books marked, and he'd open them, and he'd start reading. He'd just start reading. And he was reading it to you because he thought it was important. And I was writing as fast as I could to get as much information as I could. Most often I didn't get everything written down. There'd be little gaps, missing words, what have you. And then what I could do is I could rewrite my notes, fill in those words, try and kind of muddle through it, figure it out. And that was the most valuable use of rewriting my notes. So if you do encounter a class like that, please consider it. So I did this. And then what they recommend, this author recommends is 3 to 5 short study sessions per day, and those are described down here, right? The study sessions are, the author suggests about an hour in length, right? Where you spend a little bit of time saying, what do I want to get done? Really banging on it for 30 to 50 minutes, kind of summarizing just a little bit at the end, and then taking a break and then summarizing and kind of reviewing. And that is something I also found very critical for studying personally, was doing it over time, right? Studying and then sleeping and then seeing what you remember. That sort of stuff. Really valuable for this class. If you're trying to study for this class the night before an exam, that might be why you're struggling. Okay? So study over time. And then weekends you can spend your time reviewing, and then this takes some honesty with yourself, doesn't it? How much have I actually learned? Is it working for me? Do I understand the material well enough to teach it to others? Can I teach the class? Do I think I could teach somebody else, kind of help them get ready for the exam? If you can do all of that, then you're going to be one of those students who changes their grade. There are some people who got really not good grades on the last exam. And nobody got a perfect score, which means everybody in the room. Everybody. And so, if you want to, I'm giving you some tools and tactics to be able to do so. List of questions to ask yourself. What is the cycle and what is it used for? It's here. Joseph, what's the cycle and what's it used for? The study cycle. Those on the top page. Right here. There. What's that used for? Improving your study skills. And yeah, improving your study skills to be able to do what? Yeah, to learn, right? To learn rather than just to, because we're trying to get here, right? We're trying to get, woo! You want to learn, not just study. That's where we're at, okay? Did anybody write down the steps of the study cycle? I think you did. What are the steps of the study cycle? Review, oh, you just, that doesn't, review, study, oh, preview, study, review, attend, and assess. Right, preview. Say it again, because that sounds really beautiful. Preview, attend, study, review, assess. So you can do that. What is an intense study session, Brian?
When you study you read over everything and then you study for 30 to 15 minutes.
You study.
Take a break and review everything after to see if you understood
Yeah.
what you need to work on.
There you go. So you study for 30 to 50 minutes. Set a goal, study for 30 to 50 minutes. Give yourself a break. And then see what you remember. How long would you study for? 30 or 50 minutes?
What? 30 or what?
50 minutes. Longer side? Where you feel it? How long would you study? 30 to 50 minutes. Like where in that span would you go? Probably 50? What about you?
30.
30? Get it over with, get it done?
No, I'll study like 2 days before, 30 minutes.
Do you consider 30 minutes a lot to study?
Yeah.
It actually isn't.
But
It actually is not. In theory, you should plan to spend twice as much time outside of class as you spend inside of class. I mean, being a 15-hour student, taking 15 hours of classes should be close to the equivalent of a full-time job in terms of the amount of time and effort you spend doing it. So 60 minutes, 60, you were adding up to 120 minutes of study over the course of several days for one test is really not very much.
well, it's a lot of information.
I'm just saying, that's an opportunity, like if you ever get unhappy with your grades, that's where you begin. If you ever get unhappy with your grades, how long would you study for? How long do you like studying for? About now. So that kind of fits you. How about you? 30 minutes. Take a break.
Yeah, you have a breather, and I'm gonna actually focus.
You have a breather. What I find, I don't know, you may or may not have noticed, but I may or may not be just a touch hyper. Right? And so I find myself getting up and moving while I'm studying. Even while I'm studying, I can't just sit. Like I can't just sit and focus. Like get up and walk somewhere, walk back, and go again, and get up and walk and go again. Which makes like 60 minutes. I don't know if I could just sit and study for 60 minutes. So it's super hard. How long did you study for?
Sitting for like an hour, but I've never done that too. Like I can't sit and do it.
Yeah, I really can't.
Business class.
Rhythm in class?
Yeah. Like math, I can only do like 30 minutes. I get that.
I understand.
Like other classes, like 45. Yeah, I'd probably say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll do like 30 minutes on it, 10 minutes on it, 30 minutes on it.
I just think
And this suggests that sometimes we can break from it. Kind of turn off and turn back on. A bit like, you know, something my wife and I have talked about a bit with regards to work, is taking a day off. We worked 7-day-a-week chunks of time for months. Like, I think this last summer, it was July 5th, we started working 6-7 days a week, 7 days a week until sometime into the middle of the fall semester, like 7 days a week grinding. Because we have to do, besides teaching, we have to do research and we have to do some other things as well. So there's more to our jobs than just standing up here and talking to you all. And what we've been talking about recently is having a day off, to turn off your mind. Can be very, very important. We're getting to the point where, you know, at this point in a semester, you know, our body tells us, no, that you're not getting anything done today. Like your mind says, you're not getting anything done today because you're too damn tired. And so it might very well be that you find yourself in the future, like banging your head against the door, because it's not going in. And so if you give yourself a break and come back to it, it might really happen. Even at night, giving yourself a break overnight, it might really happen, right? And I have done that. Again, I might be considered a little intense, like not only hyper, but intense. So I have, in fact, when I was a student, not that I'm, by the way, not that I'm recommending this to anybody, right? Please be warned, be aware of that. But I have bent hardcover books over my head. Because I was trying to like get in, you know, I was just really, really intense, really, really struggling, trying to learn statistics. I get that way. So I feel in the math and that sort of stuff. Okay? This is something to think about as well, right? What level of Bloom's taxonomy do you think you need to reach in order to do well in that particular course or class? In this class, what do you think you need? In this class, where's this class? This class probably doesn't get any higher than applying. Right? I'm somewhat conscious because you are freshmen coming out of high school, and most of you haven't done much above applying. Conscious, but again, as you go forward in your career, in your academic career, recognize that hopefully you're going to get some classes to challenge you. And so I'm trying to challenge you a little. You know, in the sense like me, I think I've talked about I'm bicycling, starting to bicycle again this semester for the first time in many, many years. I'm back and out of shape. And so I started riding literally 3-4 miles just to get on the bicycle and go for 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes. And then you just gradually increase and increase and increase. And studying's the same way. This is the muscle, just like my heart, lungs, and legs. Brain works the same way. So kind of hopefully as you go through your careers, you are stretching yourself, getting stretched and stretching yourself. So that way you're moving yourself up that taxonomy and learning how to learn ever better. Right? I mean, this class is going to get just a little bit harder. I think it already, we're starting to see numbers, math, formulas. So it's gonna feel a little bit harder in here. So again, everybody, take care to, this, teaching yourself how to learn. Very, very good book if you ever want to learn more about this topic. Do you have the last slide I showed memorized? Got it in the back, what is it? Say it.
Yeah, learn it.
Connor.
If you learn it, you can teach it.
You have one. Please remember that if you remember nothing else. Have a good and safe spring break, everybody.